Hey there, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and stop talking, even though I don't really see my face on the screen yet. I have noticed with YouTube, there's always this delay. Hey, I think here I come. There we go. Let's pause that. Okay, good. So we're going to talk about nakshatras today. Just, here are a few guidelines, right? And I'll probably have to say this a few times. I'm not here to interpret your nakshatra placements for you. I'll explain why. Because the work I do with nakshatras I take very seriously, and I'm going to end up looking at a lot of different planetary permutations. So with a lot of the questions that some of you may ask going, I've got this here, and this here, what does it mean? I don't want to tell you because without looking fully at your horoscope, I can't really know for certain what that's going to be. So I don't want to tell you something that you start believing about yourself and then find out it's not true, if you follow, right? General things I can talk to people about. So we're going to talk today about nakshatras, which are my favorite topic. So any nakshatra questions that you might have, please feel free to let me know. I'm just going to check my volume and make sure that things are loud enough because I don't really feel like talking any louder. I end up shouting all the day long, into this microphone, After a while, your voice gets a little tired. So any questions anybody has about nakshatras, please do feel free to ask them, okay? And I will tell you, I'm going to kind of go over some nakshatra things today when people are not asking specific questions. Next March, I am teaching a nakshatra course on nakshatra techniques. And that's the thing about nakshatras. There's not a lot out there in regards to how to work with them. One thing about nakshatras for certain is they're very impressionable. Okay, so what do I mean by that? More so than the Rashis, more so than other factors, it's determined by all the different influences on it because nakshatras have several different facets to them. So it depends on what planets are interacting with it, whether that planet is afflicted, whether the nakshatra dispositor is afflicted, a lot of different factors, the well-being of the moon. And that's why a lot of people, I think, don't really go into the whole concept of nakshatra techniques. But on this upcoming course, I'm going to be teaching some in-depth nakshatra techniques, including a base 60 system that I have developed in order to determine both planetary strength and nakshatra dispositor strength. Right? So we can understand whether we're getting more of the positive qualities of a nakshatra or more of the difficult qualities of a nakshatra. In addition to that, we'll learn how to work with house cusps. We'll learn something called the Shayanadi avastas, which are nakshatra oriented. So with those, you can definitely learn a lot more about how a nakshatra is functioning. If you are interested in this course, I'll keep it short. If you're interested in this course, if you wish to register before the 11th of December, you'll get a 15% discount off the course fee. The course fee regularly for the entire course is $899, and the course will run from March until the following February with the break for the holidays. And in addition to that, if you want to register by trimester, because that is an option, it would be $329 by trimester. But if you want the 15% discount for registering earlier, right, for registering before December 11th, then the course fee in total would be $764, right? So you'd get almost like $135 off. And by semester, or by trimester rather, it would be $279. Okay, great. So let's see what we have got here in our questions section. How do the nakshatras in the D60 affect the present incarnation, physically, mentally, and to what degree? That's a rather broad question. It depends on the chart. But in terms of nakshatras, you see there are a couple of different ways that people are judging nakshatras in Varga charts. A lot of people, the way that they're doing it is they're going, what degree is that planet in the Varga chart? And by that degree, they're giving it a nakshatra in the Varga chart. I do it differently. What I do, and I'm not saying everybody else is wrong and I'm right, but these are the techniques I have found to yield the best results for me. What I do is I take the nakshatra position from the Rashi chart. And so say, for instance, if Mercury happens to be in Purva Palguni Nakshatra in the Rashi chart, Mercury will stay in Purva Palguni Nakshatra in every single Varga chart, regardless of which Rashi it happens to be placed in. The reason being is nakshatras, I feel, are much more astronomical in their orient. And so in that particular regard, the only astronomy that is really happening in astrology is in the Rashi chart. And then it's taken over into the other Varga charts. So in answering that question about how nakshatras affect the present incarnation, well, in the Shastyamsha, that is, the Shastyamsha tends to set the ceiling for things, right? So what you'll find is whatever is going on in the Shastyamsha is going to have, at the very least, a background effect in terms of what is going on in other areas of life. It's a rather broad question that you're asking, so that's why I have to give a rather broad answer. And a lot of it depends on the factors or the well-being of the planets in the Varga chart. And in terms of the nakshatra dispositors, you have to look at the well-being of that dispositor in the Shastyamsha chart. So there's a lot of things you have to take into consideration. Okay, let's see what else we've got going on here. What else people have put. Hasta Nakshatra. I'm just going to talk about Hasta Nakshatra broadly because I'm seeing a lot of people putting some questions about Hasta Nakshatra. Now, first of all, one thing I'm not going to do is, those of you who are putting things in the window like Jupiter in the 7th and Hasta, I'm not going to give you like a full interpretation on that, because I have found when that happens, people start kind of believing in something that may or may not be applicable to their chart. Because the only way to really know is to look at the horoscope in totality, not just the Rashi chart, right? And so you have to look at all the planetary positions, the well-being of the dispositor, etc. So some ways that Hasta Nakshatra tends to function is Hasta Nakshatra will, in a sense, always create a little bit of resistance. I like using the word inertia, right? So Hasta Nakshatra gives the power to take what one is striving for and place it in one's hand. It gives the power of manifestation on a certain level. But if we're trying to manifest something, that in its very essence indicates that there is trying to do something, a trying and working against resistance in order to make something come into being. And there are some particular qualities with Hasta Nakshatra that really fits in with that particular concept. And that mainly is associated with the gunas in with the nakshatras. And with Hasta Nakshatra, it's tamasic at its foundation, tamasic on the secondary level, and rajasic at the top level. So there is the idea of steadiness and stillness with energy moving over it, so facing resistance. Now, Hasta Nakshatra as well can have a tendency, if certain factors are not well disposed, like the planet placed in Hasta Nakshatra, or if there is a moon that, let's say, it's debilitated and it's also waning, the person may be given to control issues because they want to make something happen and they don't know when to stop. In order to manifest something, we have to work in harmony with nature, right? And so we need to be adaptable. That's the nature of the moon, which rules Hasta Nakshatra. It's not about going this way or the highway. It's about going, I have to adapt the situation in order to make things work. Okay, let's see if anybody has another question. So somebody's asking what happens when two planets are in each other's nakshatra. Do you mean each other's nakshatras? I think that's what you're saying, right? and 2 planets are in each other's nakshatras and they disposit each other. It's a pretty powerful influence, but you can't say across the board with nakshatra exchange that it's going to be this way or that way. Because again, as with everything in astrology, it depends on the well-being of those planets, the influences to those planets. Are those planets strong? If those planets are really strong, there's going to be some real intensity. Those 2 planets become very key in the horoscope, and I'll tell you why. Because with nakshatras, you can follow a chain of final dispositorship. What do I mean by that? Let's say, for instance, you have Mars in Hasta nakshatra. You go and you find the moon, which rules Hasta. And you see you've got the moon in Ashadha nakshatra. You go to find Mercury, right? And you've got Mercury in, let's say, Purva Ashadha nakshatra. You go and find Venus, right? And you've got Venus in Shravana, right? You've come back to the moon and you kind of end the chain of final dispositorship, I think. I forget which planet I started with. But basically, when you have 2 planets in each other's nakshatras, that chain of final dispositorship just goes back and forth between those 2 planets. So whatever is up with those 2 planets in the horoscope, with whatever they rule, that's a very key area of the individual's life. You'll find that that's a cornerstone of something that happens in their life. That's the way nakshatra exchange works. It's not the same as Parivartana yoga, right? It's not the same as that. It's different. And it's a different quality because the nakshatras are actually doing something different. What the nakshatras function is how to grow a planet, or if you're working with house cusps, how to grow a house cusp. They grow our consciousness in a certain way. So for instance, if you have your Dharakaraka, the indicator of relationships, in, say, Ashwini nakshatra, right? Well, you're going to go about your relationships in a very Ashwini-oriented manner. That's how you're going to go about them. That's how you're going to grow that particular factor, right? I hope that makes sense to everybody. But it's a very broad subject with nakshatra exchange. You can't say it's this way or the other way. But what you can say is it's a very prominent factor in that individual's horoscope. And when you see that, that's a key point that you need to talk about. Okay? So another question is, what if a planet is in their own nakshatra? So if a planet is in its own nakshatra, well, a lot of it depends upon the well-being of that planet, right? So let's say you've got a strong planet in its own nakshatra. It's going to grow in a very powerful way, right? It will grow. That will be a very strong area of the individual's life, a very strong quality. But again, you have to take it on balance, because we're not just looking at the Rashi chart. The Rashi chart shows the life path of the individual. What is the individual focusing on in their life? What is a key theme in their life on the path to becoming themselves? That's what the Rashi chart is about. But there are also all sorts of other things going on through the other Varga chart. So an individual could have a strong planet in its own nakshatra in the Rashi chart. And if you follow what I was saying earlier, which is if you take that planet, planetary nakshatra position from the Rashi chart, let's say, for instance, Mercury in Ashleisha, and you go, okay, well, Mercury is in Ashleisha in every single Varga chart, right? You're going to get some interesting concepts in terms of understanding how some areas of life will thrive and other areas of life will have some difficulty. Okay? All right, so let's see. There are so many different ways to analyze padas of nakshatras dependent upon which system of astrology you're using. My microphone is on. Can everybody else hear me? Is anybody else having a hard time hearing me? I'm not going to talk until I see people saying, I can hear you or I cannot hear you. Because I heard this yesterday when I was on. A lot of people were asking whether the microphone was on. Okay. So can somebody type in and tell me that great, they can hear me. Okay, so somebody's asking something I think nakshatras are very important. I'm going to come back to that here in a moment, right? So let's finish what I was saying. I have to scroll up. People are typing so quickly now. Padas of nakshatras. So there are so many different ways to analyze it. If you're using a sidereal zodiac, then you can look at the Navamsha position. If you're using a tropical zodiac with sidereal nakshatras, you can also look at the Navamsha position, right? People like to memorize the padas, but there's other ways to look at the padas too. So for instance, the first pada is going to have a dharma connotation to it. The second pada is going to have an artha connotation to it. The third pada is going to have a kama connotation to it. And the fourth pada is going to have a moksha connotation to it. So for instance, we were talking about Hasta Nakshatra. If you've got a planet in the artha pada of Hasta Nakshatra, which is a moksha nakshatra, the person's going to be driven by actions and goals that they're trying to achieve in their life to strive to create some change that liberates them in a very Hasta-oriented manner. Follow what I'm saying? Okay, I hope so. Somebody said, do I feel that going forward in astrology, nakshatras will hold more importance in analysis of charts than planetary placements, given debate on tropical and sidereal? I think that the nakshatras, as both of those systems are using sidereal nakshatras, those people who are in the tropical astrology camp and those people who are in the sidereal astrology camp, if we focus on the nakshatras, we find the common ground. I think the whole argument's really stupid, to be quite honest. I think you can argue a month of Sundays over who intended what to be used first. And unless you had a time machine to journey back in time and get absolute 100% valid, concrete proof that A is the case or B is the case, you're never going to know. The only person who knows the absolute truth is the absolute. And if you know the absolute truth, or if you're somebody who's fully self-realized and knows the absolute truth, you don't have any need for astrology. So why argue over it? I'm getting kind of tired of that statement, so I'm going to stop answering that question from now on. I think we need to let this tropical sidereal thing go for now. Okay? It's really kind of silly, I think. It's just my opinion. All right. So just for a moment too, I've got probably another 5 or 10 minutes because I just thought I'd come on for a little bit in between consultations. But one thing that I did want to say is I am starting a new nakshatra course for those of you who came in a little bit late. This course is going to start next March, and the course fee is $899 for the full course, which runs from March 2018 to February 2019. Tons and tons of nakshatra techniques, much better than last year's nakshatra course. I have so many new things planned. In addition to that, you can register by trimester for $329 by trimester. But just briefly, if you register before the 11th of December, you get 15% off of that price. So that means the full course fee would be $764 if you register by 11th December, or if you wanted to just pay for the first trimester, that would be $279, and you wouldn't owe anything else until next June if you're paying by trimester. You can find information on my website, AuthenticAstrology.com, under the course heading, and it'll take you to some of the things that are on the course. Okay. So let's see what else we have here. Okay, so somebody's asking a question, and it's actually a good question, and somebody's going, so Mars in Ashadha in Rashi chart, so it's debilitated, but it's exalted in the Navamsha. What does that mean? Well, the Navamsha chart is about those things that you find purpose in life. In addition to that, it's on a certain level, the purposeful path. Do you find purpose in going into an ashram and living in spiritual retreat? Do you find purpose in getting involved in the material world? Probably find a mixture of these things. Or do you find purpose walking the path of marriage, right? All of those things can be looked at through the Navamsha. So the Navamsha is about purpose and making decisions that make you feel like you're walking a path with purpose, right? The Rashi chart, on the other hand, is how your life feels in that area, right? So, you know, for instance, you may feel overall in your life, let's say Mars rules relationships, you may feel overall in your life that, gee, relationships take a lot of energy out of me. They drain me. They become too much stress. They frustrate me, all of which can be qualities of a debilitated Mars. They make me lash out at the other person, right? Which is another quality of, you know, of Ashadha Nakshatra. So in addition to that, if that Mars being exalted in the Navamsha chart, and that Mars happens to have a relationship influence in the Navamsha chart, that means that, for instance, that individual gets a lot out of the relationship. I really get a lot out of this relationship. This relationship is really powerful and strong for me, but it also exhausts me and takes a lot of energy out of me. So you see, in astrology, it's not a thing of contradiction. Okay, it's a thing of complication and complexities, because nobody's life is simple, is it? Right? So we have to take all of those things side by side. Okay. So any other questions? I've probably got another 6 or 7 minutes to hang around here. Okay. Nakshatras are a very broad topic. Nobody else is putting questions up. I'm just going to say something. They're a very broad topic. So there's so much for us to learn about them, and so many different people with different nakshatra techniques. I know that there are so many nakshatra techniques out there that I don't know. Okay. I don't do a lot of work with Brigu Bindu, because a lot of the things, I'm not saying Brigu Bindu, and I'm always reluctant to say that that I don't work with this or I don't work with that, because then people begin to go, oh no, that means he thinks that that doesn't work. And I don't mean that. I have just never really found a need to get into Brigu Bindu for myself. It's just that I tend to find a lot of those things in other manners. So I don't want to go too much deeply into Brigu Bindu Nakshatra, because I don't really do a lot of work with Brigu Bindu. I've worked with it a few times. I understand how to use it, but it's just not something that I get that deeply into, because I'm more fascinated by pulling information out of charts in other ways. Okay. Planet in its own nakshatra can be powerful dependent upon the strength of that planet itself. All right. Let's see what else we've got going on here. Mars, somebody's saying in India, Mars is called Manglik and is said to cause ruin despite debilitation and exaltation. Yes, but he can do it in a debilitated manner or an exalted manner. Why does Mars cause ruin? Mars is always dealing with the problem. Mars always just wants to solve a problem. Once Mars is done solving a problem, it's going to be on to the next problem. So with Mars, everything is always going to be problematic. So it's going to seem like it's always a state of ruin, right? If Mars can make something happen in life, Mars is going to make that thing happen with a lot of stress. Okay, why? Because it sees there's a problem in that area. It's a tamasic planet, right? Okay, let's see what else we get. I'm just being quiet because I'm kind of scrolling through your questions, because people type questions so quickly, and sometimes I don't get to them until a little bit later on. Okay, I've got a few more minutes, then I'm going to have to go. Ascendant Nakshatra, Mercury in 12th. That's not very clear in terms of what you're saying. You people, and first of all, I don't like getting into those things, but at the same time, if you're going to type them out, please be very clear in terms of what you're typing. And just for the person who keeps going into the Pusha as the birth star of Venus, I'm probably not going to go into that today. It would just be a long topic. I'm only here for another couple of minutes because I have a consultation going on in just a little bit. Okay. So let's see if we can find one more simple question for me to get into. And while I'm waiting for that one to appear, you get to hear my little bit of shameless self-promotion, which is, please visit the page about the Nakshatra course. You're going to find there are so many things on that course. If you took my previous course, there are a lot of things on it that are not on the first one. I don't do a lot of playing around with the 28 nakshatra system, right? I find 27 to be absolutely sufficient with me, so I haven't gone into exploring that. Maybe I'll explore that at some point in the future. Somebody's asking K2 and Jeshta. It depends on what K2 is conjuncting in a chart, all sorts of things, okay? Okay, so somebody's asking if the nakshatra lord of a planet is weak in the chart, Sun in Chitra, but Mars, owner of Chitra, is also weak, then the sun is not supported well. Exactly. The individual will have a sense of low self-esteem, difficulty associating with others, difficulty in knowing what they should sacrifice for or not sacrifice for, aka a weak sun. And in addition to that, they'll easily get disheartened in life and may find that they walk a path only to find out that it doesn't work for them, and they feel somewhat disillusioned with life in general. And that's one of the ways that we're going to start looking at planets in the Nakshatra course, understanding how all these different factors tie in with each other. Okay, we're going to stop there for today. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Just a reminder, one more time, my Nakshatra course. Here, I'll tell you a lot of the things we're going to cover on that course before I go. What are the nakshatras? We'll cover 2 different calculations that can be used to determine nakshatra positions, determine nakshatra positions in the heavens, so to speak. Meaning of terminology used to define their characteristics, like the gunas, right? And we'll understand the deities connected with each nakshatra. We'll go into an in-depth description of each of the nakshatras, taking some things from some texts that have very seldom been used in terms of explaining the nakshatras, interpreting nakshatras through final dispositorship, a system I've been working on for the last several months, which is the base 60 system for judging planetary and nakshatra strength, plus another system that I'm working with and developing, the Shayanadi Avastas, which are specific strengths for understanding planetary and nakshatra effects. And they're determined by using the nakshatra and the birth name, okay? Using Tarabala in an interpretative capacity, nakshatras in the Varga charts, all sorts of things. And if you register early, you get a 15% discount, and all that information is on my Nakshatra course page. You'll see it on this video linked below. If you don't, you can go to AuthenticAstrology.com, and you can also click on the link for courses, and it'll be there. Okay, I'm going to go now. Everybody take it easy, and I'll talk to you the next time I'm on.